Hello. Hello. It is a sunny Saturday afternoon and I am here to do the next in the series of the Birth Your Creative Project interview series. And today I'm being joined by the absolutely gorgeous Lydia Catterall, who is just about to send me a request to join. And there she is. Hello. So Lydia's going to come and we're going to hang out on the boat in the sunshine and talk about how you birth creative projects and about creative practices and all the rest of it. Here she is!
I just told myself for like 10 minutes, don't go, blah, blah. That's the first thing that I did.
Why wouldn't you go?
Because it's your face.
It's
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Do you know what? I'm really good. And that's not true all the time at the moment, but it's true today. How are you?
I'm really good too. I've had a little too much coffee, so I'm like,
oh,
yeah.
okay.
No, in a good way.
Don't throw it all at me at once. This is still early for you. This is like breakfast time.
It is, yeah. It's practically. I actually haven't had lunch yet. So anyway,
yeah, I figured.
Listen, let's talk about. So tell me and the people.
I'm going to ignore the people and talk to you.
Talk to me. What? So I put in the description of this. I pinched your description of yourself from your website, which is artist, collaborator, researcher, listener, and cheerleader. And I just want to clarify, you're not the kind of cheerleader that actually jumps up and down in the air.
I should probably get some pom-poms, shouldn't I? That would add to the look.
I think so.
No, advocate just feels like too big a word sometimes, but I think that whole banner of we rise by lifting others is just really central to what I do. You know, my practice is made up of lots of other people. I am part of lots of other practices. We need to be more generous in the way that we look after each other. So I wanted to upfront it as part of my job. I see it as part of my job.
We have an offer of pom-poms in the chat. I'm just letting you know. So clearly this is already, the magic's already begun. Thanks, Tasha.
Send them. I want.
So just make it slightly more kind of nuts and bolts for me. What actually do you do? Because I've actually been struggling to explain it to myself as well. So how do you,
sure.
I understand that it's collaborative and you're being an advocate, but just give me something really concrete. Like give me an example of something that you have done as an artist, as a creator, as a collaborator.
Sure. So primarily I'm a visual artist. All of my training is in the visual arts and all of my inspiration and grounding comes from the history of visual arts. But I also have a background of working in local authority settings and things like youth work and community-based work. And I didn't feel like the two things needed to be mutually exclusive or either of them be rubbish.
Do you mean community-based artwork, like getting kids together to paint a mural? Is that what you mean?
No, I mean that I've worked in community settings in very nuts and bolts dry ways, and then I've worked in really, really, really arty ways. And then I wanted them to work together, but I didn't want either of those things to be compromised or rubbish in the coming together. So I work really, really hard to try and bring those two aspects together without either being rubbish. One example, I host a lot of spaces. I hold a lot of space, which I know is something that you know about.
Do you mean physical space?
I do, a lot of the time. Usually, not at the moment, but usually it's rooms where people come together, often around food, often around an idea or a conversation, and I will shape that time together. So there will be an agenda, there will be some activities that we do together, but it'll all be inspired by my knowledge of the arts as well as community spaces.
And are the people who come together artists, or are they different kinds of people? Are they children? Are they adults? Are they criminals? Are they grieving with, like, who comes together in the space that you hold?
That's a really interesting list because I've worked with all of those people. And others. Yeah, it really, really depends who invites me. But I just think when you know that or when you get talking to someone and you know that they're the person to hold that space, then it doesn't matter who you are. You know that that's the person to hold that time for you. So I've had the privilege of working with all different types of people, and often those conversations are across types of people. It might be a council team trying to work with a group of artists to regenerate a city, and they want to have a conversation about how that works so that the artists benefit, but also so the city benefits. And I can see both sides of that conversation. So when I'm holding it and hosting it, I know what agendas and to make space for, but I also know where to push people a little bit and be a bit mischievous and playful, which is where the art comes in.
You're a creative provocateur, I would say, or at least
Ooh.
well, I mean, I don't know if that's the right thing, but there's my experience of you is that, yeah, you're an amazing listener, an amazing questioner, and that you can provoke new ways of seeing and thinking by virtue of having a conversation. And it's a bit like coaching. It's not unlike what I do with my clients, but there's a distinction in terms of, for me, my understanding is the way that your work is almost always grounded in something that is actually going to benefit the world. Like that there's something.
Well,
yeah, go on.
My belief is that the expertise is in the room, and that we are all experts in something, whether that's making a cup of tea or writing policy. You know, that each one of us has something absolutely invaluable to offer that space that no one else could offer or bring. And it's my job to hold that space in a way that makes the most of that expertise. And I would only ever put myself on a level with that expertise. I'm not there to lead. I'm not there to speak the answer or suggest what's best, but I am there to contribute what I have expertise in order to draw out the expertise of other people. And that's true whether it's a one-to-one situation or there's 50 of us.
In the new Birth Your Creative project, which is what has given birth to these conversations, for me anyway, I've described myself in a slightly wanky way as an ideas doula, which is slightly annoying, but
that's not wanky. It's just true.
It is,
and I'm also really, really glad we can swear. Thanks for clearing that up. I've bitten my tongue a couple of times.
I'm so sweary. I know. I don't think there are any children present, and if they were, well, they'd need educated.
But turn them away now.
But the idea doula thing is like this thing where. So I'm just going to bring it back to the kind of the essence of the Lindsay says perfect. Yeah, Lindsay has been with me through some processes, and this idea doula thing is like somebody has an idea and it comes to them as some sort of, it could be a spark, it could be an inspiration where they suddenly get a vision for a whole thing, or it could just be something much more vague. And my job, and I think yours too, is to help them to bring it from this abstract wispy thing into the world. Sometimes, not always.
For sure.
I'd love to know two things. One, a time that you have had a wispy idea that has come into the world, and a creative project that you have birthed, a specific one. And secondly, and they might overlap, where you have helped another person's creative project come into the world. So, because the whole idea, but let's start with the first one. Give me one that you had an idea, or maybe it was a collaborative idea, but you had an idea, and then it went from idea into world, wisp into
I suppose existence. I'm always building context, so I'm a really fast and intensive consumer of context. I read a lot, I listen to podcasts a lot, I talk to people a lot. Because I'm listening, I'm absorbing a lot all the time. So it never really feels to me like these bolts of lightning. It feels like things emerging from that context and making sense because of a time and place. So the project that came to mind when you asked this question was a workshop that I've delivered a few times now around this idea of resilience and creative resilience more specifically, which I kind of formed in response to a commission offer from the Newbridge Project, who are an amazing artist-led space and studio building in Newcastle, who I love very much. And they asked if I could devise a session for their associate artists, around this idea of creative resilience. And I went a bit wacky with it and organised an hour and a half where we ate some dal, we made some sugar sugar hand scrubs with essential oils. We drew a completely new landscape and community and country and set of rules and manifesto in 5 minutes. And we dressed each other up as our dream leader of that space. And within an hour and a half, people were like, what have we even done? And then a week later, I'm getting messages saying, oh, I've had this thought that actually that moment was really important, or I've just tweaked how that bit of the contracts that I hand out to people, to clients, and it just felt right to do that after your session. And it just started to occur to me that this kind of being thrown off track, if you don't hammer your head against the brick wall, if you kind of go around, look at the wall a little bit, work your way around it, maybe paint it a bit, put a new soundtrack on, distract yourself and come back to it later, that the thing can make more sense. And that's when, for me, I thought, okay, there's something in this, and I don't just want to do it once, as a lot of my workshops were being in response to individual approaches. So about 6 months later, I got asked to do just a session about something for artists. And I thought, I'm going to try this thing again, but I'm going to tweak it. And since then, it's been about 3 years. And since then, I've built on this thing, and I add something new in each time, or I might throw that podcast in, or I try a different soundtrack, or we do a different exercise at this point in it, or I start with this, or I put it at the end instead. And it's become this kind of set of building blocks that, depending on the scenario, and whether it's 1-to-1 or a group of 50 in a conference for an hour, or a group of 10 for a whole day, or a corporate team, or a group of children, that there's this kind of a bow of strings that I can kind of go, oh, this one, and this one, and this one, and this goes with this, and they kind of weave together, which is where, for me, it's still really grounded in being an arts practice. It's very visceral for me. It's sculpting, it's weaving, it feels quite physical to me. It's not just a project plan. I'm not just... And
it's multi-sensory also, like you've described every kind of aspect of, physicality and visual and olfactory and edible and all the rest of it. So I'm curious about, thank you. And I love the fact that it's like this is like a meta thing. It's like, it's birth your creative projects to help other people birth their creative projects, to help,
for sure.
It is.
Well, that's where the fizz is, isn't it? That's where the fizz is. I love that.
Tis for you. But I'm also curious about the genesis of that particular one. So if you could go back, like the people, just so I get clarification around the thing, the people who were present that first time, they were self-appointed artists who wanted to come together to learn about how to make their own practice more resilient. Is that correct?
Yeah, so they were all artists who were members of a studio group.
So were they painters? Artists of all
whole
kinds?
Range. They were all studio holders, so they all had a making practice of some kind, but across a whole different set of materials. Everything from metalwork and woodwork and jewelry making, right through to painting and sculpting and textiles, and the whole shebang.
And when you framed it as resilience, is that about creative resilience? To me, when I hear that, makes me think being able to unblock when you're blocked, being able to dig deep and find new ideas when you're running dry, being able to come back to some sort of structure so that you can keep the discipline going alongside the mystery. It's that funny dance between going...
Well, that's really interesting, because the original commission came from the fact that the money that they'd been given to host this series was coming from a funding body that was framing resilience in quite a kind of structural, masculine kind of way, as in how do we build strength, how do we stay strong in the when the wind's blowing, how do we stand straight and tall? And my initial reaction was, no, resilience should be about bend and flex. It should be about the fact that you bend in the wind and you feel the impact of that, but you can also kind of flex back or change shape even, or add some different strings to your bow that make you more able to be a bit more amorphous, exactly as you've described. So I didn't have the answer to what resilience looked like, but I knew that I could think that question out loud with other people. And like I said earlier, shape a space that was right for discussing the kind of potential aspects of what resilience might look like. But I couldn't walk into that space and say, this is what it is.
And what I love about that is the fact that your definition of resilience is well, it's emerging and it's responsive and it's agile and it's creative. It's not rigid. And what I also feel like is we're in our current situation, everything's having to be agile and look back at the old rigid lines and go, that no longer functions. So how am I going to respond to the world in a creative way? And I do feel like, as a freelance weirdo creative idea doula, facilitator, whatever it is that I am, whatever we are, because we are quite similar in our practice, that we're uniquely placed to go, oh, lockdown, you say? Well, let's get creative. And one of the things I love about you and what I have understood to be what you bring is the idea that all of these skills that artists and creatives often have in abundance, which is this ability to respond, for example, and to flex as opposed to be rigid, which have always been kind of a bit underpaid and maybe seen as a bit wafty or whatever, they're actually the skills that human beings need in order to adapt to what's happening. And your offering, as I understand it, is to translate that, for example, from a room of artists into a room full of town planners or whatever, you know, like to be able to go, hang on, these artisty types have this ability to imagine better and to respond and to collaborate. And the people who are going, but it isn't working, are the ones who need that skill set. And you're...
Well, there's two sides to it, and thank you for framing it so beautifully. You're absolutely right. I'm glad we stayed up till midnight that time and got all of that, got all of that out on the table.
It's always important to stay up till midnight, get it out on the table. Yeah, go on.
But yes, there is that those skill sets from artists translate and make sense in other spaces, or can be brought by the artists themselves into those spaces, making space for that expertise in those places. But that also artists don't often or regularly value or see those skills in themselves. So sometimes just holding up a mirror and saying, do you know what you've got? Holy crap, do you know what you've got? And do you know how valuable that is? Because actually to see value in those skills and to see value in those approaches is really countercultural right now. We're taught that louder and bigger and taller is valuable, not quiet and repetitive and resilient in the sense of going deeper and more interconnected and reworking the material to push the limits of it. We're taught to try once, oh, it's broken, throw it away, start again. That's not how the artist works, and that's so valuable right now. I don't think there's a skill set that's more valuable, but it does take energy to say that's what I value. And it takes bravery to say, yeah, I pick that over what the rest of the world thinks.
And collaboration, which is what I feel. So I'm often quite it's interesting. I found in my practice and in my clients and in the teaching that I've done, my sweet spot is working one-to-one, I think. Nina Miranda, who is an amazing singer, just gave us a thumbs up. She's agreeing with us.
Thanks, Nina.
Thanks, Nina. So I find that my sweet spot is often the best stuff comes out of me when I'm working with one person who is birthing a creative project.
Yeah.
Like a client who is writing a memoir right now, and I'm not going to go into the detail of it, but it's varying between linear, logical kind of telling the story and then going off into quite a potentially fantastical fictional thing. It's really interesting. And so
delicious.
So with her, we're having this really kind of juicy thing. But I do think there are some practices and rules that are kind of one size fits all, regardless of your practice, regardless of your medium. It just makes sense to show up like this. But my sense is you're particularly brilliant at collaborative projects. Is that true? Do you feel like it sounds like you like that combination?
I do really like that. I really like that because I think through exploring resilience and kind of through the refining of that workshop, which is ongoing, you know, I'm going to be refining it for the rest of my life, I hope. But I've found that for me, a huge aspect of creative resilience and keeping my creativity levels high is this idea of the curveball and being open to things that I haven't invited and being thrown off course and being shown where what I thought was going to be the case at the last minute just isn't. And that happens most often in collaborative scenarios.
Give me one specific example of one creative curveball that happened in one. I'd love to know one where you went, whoa, and then where it led to.
Okay, so quite recently, I walk a lot to make sense of ideas. That's one of my, when you're asking things that help me birth creative projects, I was thinking, what are those things? Going for a walk is definitely one. So I was going for a walk, I was banging my head against a brick wall with this project plan that I couldn't get my head around, and I just put a podcast on to not think really. It was a BBC 50 Things That Made the Modern Economy podcast, and it was about concrete. And
Okay.
and I was like, okay, this is going to have nothing to do with what I'm thinking about. Brilliant. That's exactly what I need. And then it went on to talk about, it was just like 7 minutes, and it went on to talk about how brilliant concrete is, because in third world countries, they were able to create concrete floors for the schools, which meant that parasites couldn't get up through the floor anymore, which meant that levels of the disease drop hugely, which means that more women and girls are going to school, which means that the feminine economy in third world countries has absolutely exploded, and women are taking up more leadership positions, which is phenomenal, all because of concrete. And then concrete is just horrific because environmentally, X, Y, and Z, and it's burning the planet and all these things. And I was just like, whoa. So just when I've just decided that concrete is the best thing ever, I'm then being told it's the worst thing ever. Ooh, wait, it's okay for things to be both. That's that. And that was my curveball. That kind of sliced across my day. And I was like, okay, whatever I do with this workshop plan, it's one offering. And for some people, it will be a sideswipe, and for other people, it will be forgettable, and that's fine. I can live with that. And the next time, I'll do a different version, and that's another offering another time. And it just kind of alleviated. It sliced across my day. It was the samurai sword across my morning, and I love that podcast. There's another one about the plough and how it's completely created gender politics. And I was like, whoa, I just thought it made lines in fields. This is amazing. So
I am absolutely astonished that you have managed to make concrete not only interesting, but sort of a feminist super force, and yet destructive.
ridiculous, right? So the last time I did a workshop that was about creative resilience, I played that podcast just for 5 minutes and just said, so yeah, we're here to think about resilience. I'm just going to put this on, and then just made a bit of silence afterwards, and one person went, "Wow, yeah." So I'm probably not going to take that job then. And it's like, wow, how did that thing, create space for someone to think something complete? But it just does.
What I love also, so I should say to anybody watching, they should sign up for your newsletter, because your I get a lot of newsletters, and I mean, I don't always read them, and I know I send them out and not everybody reads mine, because newsletters, right? Thank you. I read yours too. But yours is a really unusual gift, I find. Like everything you've just described, the kind of the way in which you see the world, which are all of these really oblique strategies and diverse ways of seeing things. And
thanks.
In a really, I find them hugely engaging, and you also write really beautifully. But it's like you often curate a list of these things that have fed into your imaginings, that have allowed you to express or to feel, and other people's practices that you share as well. It's a really, Where do they find you? Where do they find you?
So my website is hellolydia.co.uk, or there's a link in my bio on Instagram, and you can sign up. It's called Connecting Conversations. You can sign up for my newsletter.
It's really, really, really good.
Thanks,
I love your newsletter. It's
every 2 weeks.
It's a treat.
Thanks.
I'd love to know. I feel like we're probably, I don't know what time it is. Hang on, what time is it?
We've probably rambled.
We're probably getting on. No, we're good. We've got a couple more minutes. I'd love to know. So this Birth Your Creative Project course that I'm running, it operates around the premise that our ideas have their own sentience, that the ideas that we bring into being in the world are actually like beings who come to us and tap us on the shoulder or whatever, the side of the head, however, whatever they need to get you, and that they come and visit us and that we welcome them or not. Sometimes we can say no to them if it's not the right time. And that they come sometimes fully formed, sometimes they're incredibly hazy and you have to do lots of work to understand what they want to become. And that you then walk alongside with these things for a while whilst they work with you. And sometimes they go out ahead of you and they run ahead and you have to keep up. And sometimes they come to the end of their life and they're complete and they're done and you put them down. Like I know that novelists sometimes have that with books, like they'll be completely invested, but by the time it actually comes to publication, that idea no longer has any juice. They've put it down and now they're just, it's almost like they're talking about somebody they used to go out with. It's like a different kind of conversation. When you're working with other people, do you have that same, because it's different in collaboration, right? Because that notion that I've just described of having an idea come to you that you are there to service, it feels personal. It's like when I used to get songs, when I was doing a lot of songwriting, songs would just turn up. Like I would go, it was like somebody turned a radio on.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, hello. And I'd listen. And if I could be bothered, which I couldn't always, and it always happened at night, I'd have to wake up, bleary-eyed, write them down and go, all right, thank you. And if I didn't do it, they'd be gone by morning. But that's an individual, that's a relationship between me and this nebulous thing. When it's collaborative, how do you do that? How do you bring everybody's attention to this, the spirit of something, if it belongs to more than one? Like, I don't know how the Beatles wrote songs. Do you know what I mean? It's,
sure.
How do you, assuming that you, and it's a big assumption, to assume that you go with my premise. So first of all, is that assumption correct? And secondly, if you do bring everybody together, it's like everybody looking around the same campfire instead of holding their own candle, how does that work?
Well,
sorry, massive
a couple
question.
No, it is a massive question, but there's a couple of things that come to mind, and it's a space that I get really excited by, so we can talk about this. But I think that campfire metaphor is a really beautiful one, because remembering that the campfire is going to look different to every person, and they're all going to feel different heat from it, and someone's going to want to toast a marshmallow, and someone's going to want to whip out the guitar, and someone's going to want to run a mile because they don't like fire, and that's all valid and that's all okay. So a skill that I constantly try and cultivate, and I'm not saying I'm any pro, but is knowing what's yours and knowing what needs to be that idea that you own for yourself and that you wake up with in the middle of the night and go, I'm going to take that over there and cultivate it over there, and knowing what to throw into the fire. And knowing that you don't have to put all of yourself in the fire and you don't have to take all of yourself over there either. That being generous is actually really, really key, but also being willing to let go and have things not stick. And being really, really open to the idea of the road that looks really obvious might even change at the very last minute. You might go down this route as a group for the majority of the process, and at the last minute you go, oh, actually, but that thing over there feels really, really right. Oh, but we've come this far with this. Let's be brave and go with the thing that feels right. And that also really depends on a strong group connection and a lot of trust, and a lot of trust and a lot of generosity between the people involved, which isn't always possible. And an openness around that is essential too. So you've basically got to be really mature about it, really open about it, really good at communication, and open to failure, which again kind of goes back to that valuing of a skill set and a way of working that isn't culturally dominant right now, but is really, really valuable when it's done well, when it's done healthily and generously. So I've had bad collaborative experiences, I've had beautiful collaborative experiences, I've had collaborative experiences where there's nothing of me in the outcome, but the process has been really formative and might have shown up in my own work another time. And then times where I've led a team and I've had a vision. I curated a show in 2016 where I wanted a gallery space to be an open residency space where the work was being made, and I just gave an open brief to a bunch of artists, and then beyond that said, well, I don't know what they're going to make, but we've given them a budget, we've given them a space, and we've given them a time frame, and we've just got to trust they'll make something, which for a bunch of people who've worked in galleries for 20 years was terrifying, because they're used to the work showing up on this day, being hung on the walls on this day, and then it's reliably there the next day, you know? So there was a lot of trust being put in me that was a process that would just work its way out. So there are lots and lots of ways and dynamics to collaboration, and they're all going to look different. But I think generosity has got to be the key, and you can always afford to give away a little bit more than you think you can.
It's so gorgeous. And I really love how, yeah, the trust and the generosity, and also the individuals involved all having their own intuitive awareness as well. So it's like everybody, it's sort of, it's contingent upon everybody to take care of everybody and to take care of themselves, which is basically,
well, that's it,
a very smart model for how we're going to not only survive this very strange time, but potentially thrive. We are at about half an hour, so I'm gonna call it. Yes, but I just want to ask one thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Are there any creative projects that you're birthing right now? Are there any new little seedlings on the breeze that are landing? And you don't have to share if you don't want to. I'm just curious.
There's a few bits and bobs. I've just uploaded a new page to my website, which is my one-to-one offer with creatives, which is something I've been doing for a little while. And like I said, I don't have these lightning bolt moments. I start with a whisper, and then I go, oh, I think I like it. Oh, I'm going to tell people. And that's kind of what's happened with this. So I'm like you in that I really enjoy working with people one-to-one, but often who I've met in a group setting first, and then there's an opportunity to kind of go, shall we drill down into the individual aspects of your practice a bit more? And I've got like 10 years of experience of talking to artists, visiting lots and lots of studio spaces, meeting a whole range of practices, and walking alongside shoulder to shoulder. I think true stakeholdership is taking a little bit of the weight of someone's practice, and that's what I want to do. I want to be part of the web that holds up various individuals in order to create a happier and healthier arts economy overall, because we're the creators of it. We're not slaves to it. We make it by being in it and practicing in it and working in it. So I'm really, really keen to meet some new artists, and I've just posted that up. It's called The Creative Curveball. It's a new page on my website. There's also a link to it in my bio on Instagram. And I just want to hear from people.
I love it, because, I mean, we haven't officially done this, but I feel like you and I should do an exchange, because we do have such a similar but different. We bring a really different, like, I consider you a peer, as I've said to you before.
Yeah,
and
same.
It's a really beautiful, it's very rare. There's very few people I know who have that same heart-centered, creative, guiding toolkit. And when you say that a stakeholder can take some of the weight, that just makes me want to like collapse onto you and go, not in a horrible way,
and squash you.
No, because it's so rare. Because as individual freelancers, as artists, as creatives, it's like, my job description is so peculiar that nobody knows how. Like, I'm a ritual designer and a facilitator. Like, what, there's all sorts of kind of there's aloneness in present in the nature of the work. And so to have somebody like you there to go, got you, I can hear you, I can hold you, I can listen, and to be able to help to carry some of the creative process. We need midwives. We need creative midwives.
Well, that's it. That's why I love the fact that you've used the word birth in the name of your new course, birthing creative projects, because it's a feminine process. It's a feminine skill set, a feminine set of values, not female, but feminine. And there's a midwifery of newness that needs to be a skill set that we learn. We could talk about this all day.
Oh, we could. And it emphasizes the idea that something's coming through you. It isn't you.
Yes.
Even if your creative project is your website or is your memoir, it's still something that is coming through you, to which you are in service. Like, you are in your creative energy.
And if someone has the kind of the beans to hold a part of that in a way that doesn't hurt them, when I make offers to people, or when I make offers to groups, there's got to be a trust there in my own agency that I know what I can give without
Yes.
hurting myself. And I trust that when others offer things to me, it's the same. But in terms of thinking about the abundance of skill and resource amongst the creative community, we all have things that we can reproduce and produce more of without any effort at all, that to someone else is their complete dry spot. That isn't a thing that comes easily to them. But to us, we're like, oh yeah, sure, no worries, I'll provide a bit of that. So if we're all offering up the thing that doesn't hurt us, but that we have in abundance, then that pool is going to be, delicious.
It's like delicious is the word. I'm thinking it is like it's cooking, isn't it? It's like coming in. Sorry to like keep going into the metaphors.
I get quite excited about food. It's just soup to you. It's all soup.
I do. I'm afraid we are going to have to. And I am
We
just
are.
going to say though, the Birth Your Creative Project course is a lot. It's a one size fits all, as opposed to this beautiful bespoke, unique offering that both you and I could give to individuals. But it is an online course that is it's a way of bringing an idea to life. So if you're watching this going, I did have an idea for a project or a book or an album or a recipe collection or a business or a course or whatever, like
it's all the thing.
It's there, like the structure to take it from this idea into the world and to connect with the heart of it and to have a mechanism to meet the spirit of it, and then to bring
have
it into
someone
the world.
like you hold that process for someone else as an external. That's the curveball aspect. Is kind of you can ask yourself questions about your own project, but it's really different when someone else walks in and goes, yeah, but what about that though?
And
which
also
you do so beautifully.
Back at you. Oh, we could go on. Can we just go on? But you're Mark. No,
you should press the button.
Brilliant. This is going to go on my IGTV, and then I'll somehow figure out a way of it being out in the world. Lydia, you are wonderful. Everybody needs to sign up to your newsletter immediately, if not sooner, which is hello.
There's one going out tomorrow that's just going to be a quick kind of, here's some joyful stuff while stuff's weird. And then next week will be an article. I do them every 2 weeks.
They're just brilliant. Lydia, I'm so glad that you exist in the world. Thank you for doing this.
I love you.
I love you
Thanks
too.
for asking me.
All right.
Have a great Saturday.
You too. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Out.